Hello everyone, I am the Medic Kirby, and welcome to my channel, The Commander Tavern. The Commander Tavern is a channel dedicated to my favorite Magic the Gathering format. The Brewery is a series on this channel showcasing my spicy brews and other deck techs. On this episode of The Brewery, I'll be discussing my take on a partner commander from Jurassic Park, Owen, Grady, and Blue. If you like this deck or any of the cards I'll be mentioning throughout the video, please consider using my TCG Player affiliate link when purchasing those cards. You can find that link down in the description. It'll really help the channel at no extra cost to you. But the very best way you can help support the channel is with my Patreon. There are plenty of perks for being a patron, such as early access to certain videos, exclusive deck techs, gifts, and more for as little as $1. You could also become a channel member for just 99 cents. Show off your support with a logo next to your name and exclusive emojis. Or you can always just support my channel for free by simply liking, subscribing, and sharing, which also helps out a lot. I put out a video every Monday, so you don't want to miss out. You can join my Discord server for free if you want to join the Commander Tavern community. All pertinent links are down in the description. Alright, let's get back to the episode. Owen is a 3/2 human soldier scientist for 1 generic, 1 red, and 1 blue. You can tap him to put either a menace, trample, reach, or haste counter on target dinosaur. It's a good thing he partners with Blue, always giving you access to a dinosaur for these counters. The only drawback to his ability is being able to activate it only at sorcery speed. Pretty ironic since he's riding a motorcycle, but I digress. In turn, Blue, a dinosaur for 2 generic, 1 green, and 1 blue, gives each dinosaur that enters the battlefield under your control the same counters it has for each type. This means that if Blue had 5 +1/+1 counters, the new dinosaur would only get 1 of them. But that's fine since the keyword soup of counters will still transfer onto the new dinosaurs. Not only is this ability amazing between these partners, but also the deck's companion, Keruga the Macro Sage. Keruga is also a dinosaur, and since most dinosaurs have a high enough mana value, you're only really sacrificing cheap mana acceleration and interaction in order to have Keruga as a companion. But it's super worth it since you have access to yet another dinosaur since the beginning of the game. And it's a dinosaur that will draw us a ton of cards when cast. The only true downside is the companion rule errata, but it is what it is. While Keruga is the best dinosaur for card advantage solely because we always have access to it in the sideboard, it's not the only card advantage dinosaur in the deck. The deck's also running Runic Armasaur, Nezahal Primal Tide, Curious Altasaur, Earthshaker Dreadmaw, Etali Primal Storm, and Etali Primal Conqueror. As I mentioned earlier, practically every amazing dinosaur for the deck has a mana value of 3 or more, even both commanders, allowing for a Keruga companion, so we don't really miss out, especially with these. The Armasaur and Nezahal both draws cards depending on an opponent's action. The former does so when they activate an ability on a creature or land that isn't a mana ability, while the latter does so when they cast a non-creature spell. As a bonus, Nezahal can't be countered, gives us a limited hand size, and can be delayed blinked for free by discarding 3 cards, so it sticks around. Oh, and on a 7/7 for 7 mana if that weren't enough. The deck's still running Reliquary Tower and Decanter of Endless Water due to how many cards we're capable of drawing, so it's great to have yet another way of getting a limitless hand size, especially from Keruga. The Altasaur and Dreadmaw draws cards depending on our dinosaur numbers. The former does so whenever a dinosaur deals combat damage to a player, which is a coastal piracy effect just for dinosaurs. But since almost every creature in the deck except for Owen and a couple of others are dinosaurs, it doesn't really matter, especially since it itself is a dinosaur. The Dreadmaw is similar to Keruga in that it draws us those cards when it enters the battlefield. Lastly, both Etalis provide us card advantage but from opponents' libraries. Primal Storm impulse draws from everyone's library, including ours, and we could just cast any number of spells from them for free. I guess it's more cheating than impulse drawing, but you get the point. Primal Conqueror does the same but when it enters the battlefield. However, if you're not stuck behind lands, since players have to keep going until they hit a non-land card, so it means you always get a spell. If that wasn't enough, you could pay either 9 generic and 2 life or 9 generic and 1 green to transform it at sorcery speed. Primal Sickness is now an 11/11 with trample and indestructible with a better wording for infect since it also deals damage. If it manages to go through entirely, you just killed an opponent. This card is absolute insanity in the deck. On the topic of actual impulse draw, the deck is running Bonehorde Dracosaur. At the beginning of our upkeep, we impulse draw 2 cards and we create a 3/1 dinosaur or treasure depending on what type of card we exile this way. If that wasn't enough, it's a 5/5 with flying and first strike for just 5 mana. This card is busted here, especially since those 2 keywords aren't granted by Owen. This not only makes it an insane beater, but it also provides dinosaur tokens to get more counters from Blue as well as treasure for mana acceleration. Speaking of tokens, Regisaur Alpha, Quartzwood, Crasher, and Welcome 2 also provide dinosaur tokens. The former only does so when it enters the battlefield, but at least it gives all dinosaurs haste, which is never a bad thing. The latter has trample creatures we control create absolute monsters if we're able to deal enough damage. That shouldn't be an issue in an aggressive deck like this one, especially the trample part. The Saga is pretty busted in this deck since it animates a non-creature artifact for each opponent as a wall. That might seem bad, but it's easier to get rid of creatures than artifacts, especially with the final chapter of the Saga that destroys all walls. This is hilarious if you're facing an Arcades deck. In any case, it's the second chapter that creates a 3/3 dino with trample. However, it's even better than that since it's exiled and returns transformed when it concludes. It returns as Jurassic Park, a land that gives all of our dinosaurs escape while they're in the graveyard. If that wasn't enough, it's also a Gaia's Cradle type land for dinosaurs, so you can really imagine how much mana this will accelerate. Speaking of mana acceleration, Topiary Stomper, Wayward Swordtooth, and Regal Behemoth also help in that department, along with Bonehorde Dracosaur. The plant dino ramps when it enters the battlefield but can't attack or block unless we control at least 7 lands. But that's fine since at the very least it's a CMC land-based ramp effect. Same with Wayward Swordtooth, but it lets us play an additional land per turn. And getting the City's Blessing with this deck is a piece of cake. Likewise, Regal Behemoth depends on the Monarch status, but we get it when it enters the battlefield. Not only will this help our lands tap for more mana, but keeping it gives us card advantage at the end of our turns. Hunting Velociraptor also helps us somewhat accelerate our deck. The Clever Girl gives our dinosaur spells Prowl, which is amazing since all creatures apart from Owen and a couple of others are dinosaurs. Being able to cast any of them for 3 mana just by having hit at least one opponent with at least one dinosaur is too busted. Imagine casting something like Galta Stampede Tyrant for just 2 generic and 1 red. And then you just empty your hand of dinosaurs when it enters the battlefield, essentially having played them all for just 3 mana. Absolute insanity. Granted, it's not even that difficult to hardcast Galta, so if you're able to dump your hand full of dinosaurs that then get haste, it might be enough to end the game. Herald's Horn and Urza's Incubator also provide mana acceleration in the form of cost reduction. Obviously, we're choosing Dinosaur as the creature type. As a bonus, the Horn has the potential of drawing us an extra card if the card we reveal in the upkeep is a dinosaur, which is going to be significantly likely. Besides card advantage and mana acceleration dinosaurs, the deck's also running Thrashing Brontodon, Tranquil Throwback, Sign of Calamity, Kagala and Yidaro, Wrathful Raptors, and Cresting Mosasaurus for that much needed section of interaction that all Magic decks need. At least these pieces of interaction are synergistic because they come attached to a dinosaur that can then get pumped. The first 4 all deal with destroying an artifact or enchantment. The Brontodon requires mana and sacrificing to do so. The Frillback does so almost with a kicker type effect, but you can pay a little extra to also exile a graveyard and gain 4 life. The Scion does so when connecting to the player's face, but it also has Myriad, making it even more dangerous. Kagala and Yidaro do so when you pay 4 and discard it, but at least it gets shuffled back into our library and then we draw a card. However, Kagala and Yidaro also provide interaction in the form of fighting a creature we don't control when it enters the battlefield. We can also choose to give it trample and haste until end of turn, but those are 2 counters that Owen can give blue and then can give it to all of our creatures when they enter the battlefield. The Raptors give all of our dinosaurs an enraged type ability that will then give that much needed damage to any non-dinosaur target. This can either be used to kill off creatures, planeswalkers, battles, or sent to opponents' faces, which is amazing. The Mesosaurus provides an evacuation type effect when cast, but it hits all non-dinosaur creatures. Fortunately, apart from Owen and a handful of other creatures, almost all of our creatures are going to be dinosaurs, even our token creatures. It also has Emerge, which we can really use if we needed to cast it for cheaper, which is great. While these dinosaurs have that key deck building aspect to them, they can also end the game. However, dinosaurs like Taurian Mauler, Tyrannex Rex, and Galta Primal Hunger also help us win the game. While these provide no mana acceleration, interaction, or card advantage, they're still amazing bodies to help finish out opponents. The Changeling is also a dinosaur, which is amazing the more the game progresses because the bigger it becomes. With Trample, it could easily take out an opponent. Tyrannax isn't as quick a clock as a Tali Primal Sickness, but it's uncounterable and has built-in Trample, Ward 4, Haste, and Toxic 4. So 3 hits and it's game over. Galta will almost always just cost double green, so dropping a 12/12 early on with the potential of getting haste is super busted. Displaced Dinosaurs also helps end games by having our historic permanents enter the battlefield as 7/7 dinosaurs. This helps turn Arwen into a dinosaur, a 7/7 dinosaur on top of that, meaning that he could give himself keyword counters. It also has blue enter the battlefield as a 7/7 since it's also a legend. Keep in mind that this will nerf any bigger legendary dinosaurs since it'll make them 7/7. However, it's well worth it since that situation is very rare. While this interaction might seem niche, it's incredibly useful because at the very least it pumps all legendary dinos with a power toughness of less than 7/7 while also making Owen a dinosaur. And it's incredibly busted when combined with Poetic Ingenuity, which is obviously in the deck. On its own, this enchantment is already amazing since we create a treasure token for each dinosaur we attack with, so it's already amazing mana acceleration. However, when combined with displaced dinosaurs, those treasure tokens enter as 7/7 dinosaurs, meaning that if we controlled blue with keyword counter soup on it, they'd also enter with those counters. They're also still treasure, so we can sacrifice them for mana. But more importantly, this will double our board of dinosaurs just by attacking. This combo is absolutely busted, and hopefully you're able to pull it off when playing. Nothing is more satisfying than creating a dozen treasures that are also 7/7 dinosaurs. Speaking of turning into dinosaurs, Sunfurl Imitator, the last dinosaur in the deck, can turn into any dinosaur we control whenever it attacks. However, it still keeps its name, helping bypass the legend rule. It also stays that way indefinitely while also keeping its copy ability. This dinosaur is possibly one of the best ones in the deck since it can double the effect of any other busted dinosaur or just be a game-ending beater. While all of these dinosaurs are amazing on their own, they're obviously much better when receiving all of the counters that blue can give them when they enter the battlefield. However, we shouldn't just rely on the counters provided by Owen since there's only 4. Granted, as of the recording of this video, Owen is the only way to give haste counters, but there are other plenty of counters to give. Agent's Toolkit and Scavenge Brawler are some of the best sources for counters since they have multiple types of counters on them. The toolkit only triggers for 1 counter when the creature enters, but that's fine since the deck has ways of moving counters around. But it's able to give blue either a +1/+1, flying, death touch, or shield counter. Shield counters are incredibly useful, but not as good as straight up indestructible counters. Scavenge Brawler has to be exiled from your graveyard for 5 mana at sorcery speed, but it can give blue a flying, vigilance, trample, and lifelink counter, along with 4 +1/+1 counters. As previously explained, blue can't give the same amount, just one of each type of different ones it has on it, but this soup is amazing nonetheless. As a bonus, the Brawler can enter as a 7/7 dinosaur if we control the displaced dinosaurs. Same with the toolkit. Family's Favor, That Which Was Taken, and Tyrite Sanctum provide some much more protective counters. The enchantment can put a shield counter on an attacking creature. If we give it to blue and it doesn't take any damage in combat, it'll still have the shield counter for any future dinosaur entering the battlefield. The artifact doesn't give an indestructible counter per se, but so long as we control it, then any permanent with a divinity counter on it will be indestructible. This might seem slow, but all we have to do is give one to blue and then future dinosaurs will enter with one. For a truly spicy interaction, Mastery of the Stack makes it possible to give a divinity counter to That Which Was Taken. If you control blue and displace dinosaurs, That Which Was Taken will enter the battlefield as a dinosaur. That will trigger blue. In response to blue's trigger, activate That Which Was Taken to give blue a divinity counter. When blue's trigger resolves, That Which Was Taken will enter with 1 counter of each type blue has, including the divinity counter. Now That Which Was Taken will protect itself. You'd also need a way to give it haste so that you can activate it, but you can do that at least with Register Alpha. Super spicy. Moving along, we have the land that gives actual indestructible counter, but you have to first make blue a god, along with a bonus +1/+1 counter, and then in a future turn, give it the indestructible counter. Doing so in 2 turns isn't that bad, especially if you have other ways of protecting blue anyways, but we'll see those cards later on. Slippery Bog Bonder provides another protective counter in the form of Hexproof. Not only that, but you can also move any number of counters from amongst other creatures onto blue. If Agent's Toolkit were a 7/7 dinosaur, you can move all of its counters onto blue too. Nesting Grounds is another way of moving around counters while not taking up a slot in the deck. Its only downside is being activated at sorcery speed. It's a shame that Giant Fan isn't legal in Commander solely because of the color of its border. Not only can you move counters around, but if it made no sense to, it'd just become a +1/+1 counter, which is still great. But I digress. As for more lands that deal with counters, we have Karn's Bastion. Proliferating keyword counters might seem superfluous since you only need one of them. However, shield counters do stack as well as power toughness counters. You can also proliferate keyword counters to then move them around, so it's still incredibly useful if you think outside the box. Speaking of lands and thinking outside the box, Dwarven Armory is a pretty busted enchantment here that many of you probably haven't even seen, much less even heard about. If you pay 2 and sacrifice a land during your upkeep, you could put a +2/+2 counter on target creature. Keep in mind that this is not 2 +1/+1 counters. This is 1 +2/+2 counter. So if blue had both a +1/+1 and a +2/+2 counter, these are considered to be different counters. Therefore, new dinosaurs will enter our battlefield with both counters, essentially entering with a permanent giant growth effect. With Karn's Bastion, we can further proliferate these counters. I love this enchantment, so I'm glad it does so much work here. And you only need to lose 1 land too, which is a pretty good trade-off. The deck having so many huge dinosaurs or dinosaurs that can become huge makes it easier to include cheaper ways of drawing cards. This is why the deck is running Tribute to the World Tree, Elemental Bond, Garruk's Uprising, Kira Behemoth Beckoner, Temur Ascendancy, Guardian Project, The Great Henge, and Kindred Discovery. All of these trigger whenever a creature enters the battlefield. Granted, the first 2 do so if the creature's power was at least 3, while the last 3 do so regardless of power. The rest of them trigger if the creature's power is at least 4, but that shouldn't be an issue with this deck. As a bonus, the Great Henge also puts a +1/+1 counter on the creature if it wasn't a token, and it can tap for double green. Its casting cost isn't even an issue in the deck, costing just double green more often than not. With Kindred Discovery, we also get the added bonus of it triggering whenever a dinosaur attacks, which is absolutely busted here. We do have to choose the dinosaur creature type, which is fine. Same with Vanquisher's Banner. This one doesn't trigger on ETB, but it does trigger on cast. It also gives a static pump to our dinosaurs, which is great for an aggressive deck like this one. While the deck's card advantage pieces are all synergistic, that's fine because the deck has so many overlapping engines and synergies. That being said, while it has a ton of synergistic interaction pieces and mana acceleration pieces, those require some more freedom in games. That's why the deck is still running Beast Within, Chaos Warp, Guthrie Wright's History, Chaos Mutation, Fierce Guardianship, and Deflecting Swap. The last 2 can still be considered somewhat synergistic since they're free only if you control your commander. But since the deck has 2 commanders, it's twice as likely that they'll be free. And even if they're not that expensive to hardcast anyways. Keep in mind that we're limited to what interaction pieces to include because Keruga is the deck's companion. As for protection against opponent's own interaction, the deck is running Champion's Helm, Darksteel Plate, Mithril Coat, and Shield of Kaldra. These are already amazing, but having Keruga as a companion means being unable to run Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots. But these are still good, and you'd barely miss these footwear when Keruga's drawing you a ton of cards on top of dealing a ton of damage. This also impacts mana acceleration since we can't run my favorite ramp trifecta nor things like Soul Ring. But we can still run Cultivate and Kodama's Reach, which are pretty decent on their own, and if you didn't play a land that turn, are essentially giving you 2 basic lands that turn. Same with Explore the Underdark. It might seem like we're overpaying for 2 tapped basic lands, but this spell also gives us the initiative. And the first room of Undercity has us get a basic land into our hand. If we didn't play a land that turn, then it just got us 3 basics onto the battlefield. Undercity is also just an amazing dungeon to venture through if we manage to keep the initiative. Hunting Wilds, Ranger's Path, Skyshroud Claim, and Hour of Promise are some more sorceries that get us 2 lands onto the battlefield. However, the first 3 get us 2 forests for 4 mana, and these aren't basic forests either, so we can get Ketria Triome along with any other dual-typed forest, which is amazing. Hour of Promise costs 1 extra but can get us any 2 lands. This is great at getting either Reliquary Tower, Karn's Bastion, and or Nesting Grounds straight to the battlefield. Spelunking provides mana acceleration if we already played a land plus had another land in hand, or maybe the card it draws us was also a land. So for 3 mana we're getting some decent value. However, it also helps our lands enter the battlefield untapped. We can't play Amulet of Vigor, but we can play Spelunking. All the deck's land-based ramp have the lands enter tapped. This makes it so they don't. Don't sleep on this card in a high value deck like this one, especially since the deck is also running all 4 2-mana bounce lands. These help with the high CMC spells. Sure, the trade-off is entering tapped and bouncing a land, but if they can enter untapped, they provide a ton of value. Especially since the bounce land doesn't have to be untapped. Another use for these is bouncing Seagate Restoration, Valakut Awakening, and Glasspool Mimic if we had to play them as lands. Remember that these do not take up a spell slot in the deck only if we play them as lands if we needed to. If we did, we could bounce them with any of the 4 bounce lands and then we could cast them as their front side if we wanted to. The first 2 are amazing at drawing us cards while the Mimic can copy our best creature in play at the moment, also getting value from blue if entering as a dinosaur. So the bounce lands are as useful as you want them to be. Recall that the deck is relatively slow until it gets the ball rolling. We can't run Soul Ring, but we can at least run these. The deck is also running Ancient Tomb for double colorless, so we have ways of getting free mana acceleration regardless of Keruga as the companion. Speaking of lands, the rest of the deck is just the rest of the lands. Apart from the previously mentioned ones, the deck's running all 9 fetch lands, all 3 shock lands, all 3 snow duels, Ketria Triome, and Command Tower, as well as 2 of each basic land for the basic land ramp effects in the deck. As with all of my deck techs, you can build your mana base according to your budget. Whether you include more expensive cards or even cheaper cards is up to you. You do you. This brew is just an idea of how to build around Owen and Blue with Keruga as the companion. While the original Ixalan block produced a ton of viable legendary dinosaur lords, I was not satisfied with any of them at the helm of a dinosaur deck until I saw Owen and Blue. They're relatively cheaper to cast while still providing a ton of benefits. You can also run Keruga as a companion since you have access to blue, unlike with a commander like Gishath. If you're interested in the deck list of this spicy brew of mine, you can find a link to it down in the description. I would like to thank all my patrons for supporting me, and a quick shout out to all my higher tier patrons, the Brewers, for their patronage. I'd also like to thank anyone using my TCG Player affiliate link. That also helps out the channel. I also want to thank any channel members. Your membership is greatly appreciated. And to everyone, thanks for watching this episode of The Brewery on the Commander Tavern. I am the Man at Kirby, and happy brewing.